When we sit down to assess the relative merits or strengths of any kind of change that we've done to our systems, we rely on our ears. But there are some pitfalls with the process of relying on hearing that we've got to be careful of, because it's not without its risks. First, let's talk about the psychogenic response. The psychogenic response, it is a psychological process whereby we create for ourselves what should be there, whether it's there or not. And in hearing, we do this. Psychogenic processes are well documented in psychological and physiological literature. But as audiophiles, we're at particular risk for this, because we placed quite a bit of investment in our purchases, and we might do a whole lot of research on a particular product and read all the reviews and go on the forums and see what other people say, and then we plunk down a big ton of cash, and it arrives at our door, and we put it in with some excitement, and well, we expect to hear good things, and often we do. But there are certain practices that if you employ while you're doing the listening process, you may not be doing yourself a service and may be hearing only what you want to hear and not what's actually present. One way that I approach listening to a new system or a new setup in order to avoid a psychogenic response is I trust my immediate instinct. I do not do prolonged, extensive listening. The longer you take time to make a decision, the more you're likely to hear what you want to hear. I encourage you not to spend a lot of time finding the answer to the question of whether this new thing you just added to your system or this new setup process you just did, it sounds any better or not. Just don't spend a lot of time with that, because you're increasing, the longer you do, the more you're increasing the probability of the psychogenic response to kick in. And physiological response as well. This plays out for itself, I think, when you go over to a friend's house and it sounds tonally way off, but they love it. We've all experienced this. You got to ask yourself, how powerful is this natural function that we have to hear what we want to hear? Now, one clue, perhaps, that would indicate whether you're a victim of this is if you only listen to certain types of music. Limited types of music, like small ensemble jazz, and that's it. This is one symptom I find of systems where the tonal response is way off, that the owners of those systems tend to really limit themselves with respect to their musical selections. And it's also the longer amount of time between what you're hearing now and the state your system was in previously. So there's two things to watch out for. One, your oral memory, that is the memory of how well you actually heard what you heard 5 minutes ago or 5 days ago or 5 weeks ago, versus to what you're hearing today. This can be difficult to assess, because as one reason it's difficult is because when we listen, we often listen for different things. So this moment I might be listening for this spatial aspect of what I'm listening to, the separation between instruments, how large the sound stage is. And the next moment I might be listening for tonality or decay or transient impact. So when we listen between A versus B states of our system or setup, it's best if we can decrease the amount of time between hearing A and then B. So if we decrease the time between A state and then B state, and then we trust our guts as to what we're hearing early on. I'll speak to for myself on this. I have a high degree of self-doubt of what I'm hearing when I listen. I am afraid of coming to a conclusion that is informed by a psychogenic response. I would feel irresponsible if I shared with any of my clients or my audience that I was hearing something when I really wasn't. So I avoid the psychogenic response by coming to a conclusion quickly. If I don't hear an obvious improvement within the first minute of music, then I'm done. In fact, I'm not chasing tiny incremental improvements. I'm looking for something that will be convincing across iterations, where if I do it at my place and I do it at your place and I do it at another friend's place, there's a high degree of probability that we will all hear it. So the minutia, I caution you to be careful and trust your early instincts. If you're not hearing a difference, an obvious improvement, and a difference is enough, it must be an improvement. If we're not hearing an improvement, not just a difference, but an improvement over whatever the previous state was, well, don't keep looking for it, because you might convince yourself it's there when it's really not. One other tip I suggest is that if obviously you've got to use the same selection of music when you listen to A state versus B state. Don't change the music set between there. But whatever is let's say you're finishing up your listening session on state A. Whatever your last song is, replay the first 10 to 15 seconds. So that's the last thing in your memory. Then go to state B and start that track, so that you have heard that very first 10 to 15 seconds of that final song in your play track list as your first selection when you listen to state B. So that's it. Until next week on another Soundbites video. See ya.